A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fisher. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Karate Priest Podcast. I'm your host, Father Daniel Duplantis. I'm a martial artist, musician, airman, and a priest of the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux. One of my other passions in life is teaching, especially teaching about the Catholic faith. Catholicism is a very deep faith. Jesus himself told Peter to put out into the deep for a catch. The most significant answers to life's most important questions often lie deep beneath the surface. Many people have questions about their faith. Through this podcast, my aim is to explore these questions and encounter incredible people along the way. Their stories show that God is constantly at work in our lives every single day, sometimes in the ordinary and sometimes in the extraordinary. Some of the topics treated in this podcast may be sensitive or controversial, but their discussion holds the key to truly living as God created us to live, which is to say that He created us to live in authentic freedom, loving Him above all else. Thank you for joining me on this journey of faith, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Karate Priest Podcast. I am your host, Father Daniel Duplantis. Today we have a fantastic interview I've been so excited for because I've seen some of his work. It's actually kind of made its way to my area here in Louisiana. Today our guest is world-renowned sculptor Timothy Schmalz. Timothy, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here, taking a break from sculpting to have a nice chat.
Wonderful, yes, and it's been great to see some of your work that's been coming out the last couple of years. The Vatican specifically had contracted you for one of your more recent ones that's been touring around, and the one that made its way to our area. So just real briefly before we get into some of your works, just can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from, and how did you get into this not just this art, but this I like to consider it a ministry as well, what you do.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm actually from Canada, a small town outside of Toronto, and I actually started doing sculpture when I was 16. I absolutely fell in love with it, and basically I continued ever since, and I've learned a lot. I think when you're dealing with artwork, it opens up to a lot of creative ideas, and so I think that that was an amazing experience up to this point. I'm like 53 right now, so that's a lot of years obsessively sculpting, and yeah, throughout that time, I've felt my artwork has grown, and it early on it really attached itself to Christianity. I like to say that I had an artistic conversion when I was 19. When I left art school, and I got accepted to the greatest art school in Canada. I stayed there 3 months, and then I had basically an artistic crisis, which kind of led to my spirituality being brought out within my artwork, and that's basically 1920. I started to become an absolute Christian artistic fanatic. And so I was in my studio at the time, and I thought, I'm probably doing the most radical thing here in Toronto. I'm actually sculpting Jesus. And you know, it's phenomenal because the greater art world out there I actually did not consider Christian artwork even artwork, although they were brought up on Michelangelo, the great masters, that 99% of Western artwork is Christian artwork. But it seems like there's this absolute blind spot within our mainstream media about that heritage and the value of it as far as art is concerned, right? And so it's interesting. So and art is a great analogy for our society in general. I think I like to say that the art schools and the art world was the first woke world, and it was very much extreme to the idea that if it's not shocking, it's not artwork. And that's what I rebelled against. I rejected it. I dropped out of art school. I wanted to do something that has value, not just shock for, or art for art's sake. That's what they call it, right? And it's like it's to me that's absolutely superfluous, superficial, and it's not valuing artwork as much as it should be. It's not just art for art's sake. I like to say it's art for God's sake. The greater you bring your art to a subject that's great, your artwork will be great. But if it's just kind of looking in on itself, I think it's going to be redundant, and if not, a little bit kind of nihilistic. And that's what I see in this culture right now, through the glasses of artwork. But then you can take that and look at our larger society and come to some of the same conclusions.
Yeah. Wow. Wonderful. It's incredible how much it's so relatable things with with everything you just said. Before seminary, I was a music major, and I kind of had a similar experience as you, where I went to music school for I lasted there a year, but by halfway through that time, I'd already made my decision that, at the end of that term, I was going to leave for the seminary, and kind of the same thing I saw kind of in the liberal arts world, that you're right. If it was hard to be religious in that environment, and just the things that we valued, and I felt like I didn't quite fit in. And so, I've always loved church art. And, in the college seminary, we took a course on art history, and how much of that, throughout the last several centuries was religious art, and so it's incredible to see just what we can put in especially like in and around our churches. And I think it's the church has always been such a great patron of the arts, with sculpture, painting, music, architecture, all these things. It's you bring something so wonderful to the table that helps to inspire not just our imagination, but also imaginative prayer. And so I think that's such a great thing that you do. I guess my next question is, what kind of there's really two pieces that I've kind of drew my attention, and we've kind of talked about those leading up to this in the last few minutes. Can you tell us about the first one is the homeless Jesus, and then the second one is Angels Unaware?
Homeless Jesus is a sculpture. I don't know if you can post a picture of it or something, but it's a sculpture of Jesus lying on a bench, wrapped up in a blanket, almost exactly like you'd see a real person out there on the street. And the idea for the piece came to me. It hit me when I was walking in a major city, and it was months prior to me being here out in the country. So when I went into the city, I was kind of really agitated to begin with. And then right beside me, I saw a homeless person. And I don't know if it was a male or a female. The person was just cloaked in a blanket, a sleeping bag. And it was just one of the most haunting things. It was at November. I remember I was going to an Anglican cathedral, and right before Christmas, in the middle of the day, in one of the busiest streets you could imagine, there's this shrouded figure, and it was just a mystical experience for me. It just penetrated me, and my initial reaction was, that's Jesus. And as I kept going, that was kind of in my mind constantly. I went back to my studio and I thought, I'm going to sculpt that. I'm going to sculpt that experience. I'm just going to make a couple modifications on it. I'm going to pull the blanket up a bit and have the feet of Jesus with the wounds, because I wanted it to be very discreet and not obvious that it was Jesus. And so by just pulling the blanket up a bit, exposing the feet, having the wounds on the feet, that's the connection of who it actually is. And so I created this sculpture 10 years ago, and it really is an amazing tool. It has become an amazing tool for people to see the Gospels, to see them. And it's fascinating because as I did it, I realized throughout the process that I was creating almost line for line Matthew 25, because in Matthew 25, it's so poetic. It's one of the most beautiful passages of the Bible. But I think one of the great things about it is that eureka moment, that ambiguity at the beginning of when did we feed you, when did we visit you when you were in prison, right? And then the punch, whenever you've done this to the least, you've done it to me. And that is such an amazing unfolding. And my sculpture, in a sense, visually unfolds it the same way, almost like theater. So many people look at the sculpture initially and think that it's a real person, real homeless person. And then they realize it's a sculpture. And then only when they get closer up to it and they look at the feet, do they realize it's Jesus. So it kind of takes you on that scriptural passage in 3D. You can walk, you can experience it. I once had this chaplain at a high school. He said he saw it and he thought, oh yeah, it was at a Jesuit building. He said, I'll leave it to the Jesuits to put a life-size sculpture of a homeless person in front of their building. And he sat down on the bench. And I did create a little bit of room for someone to sit down on the bench near the feet. And so the chaplain was about to put his hands on the feet. And then only then did he realize the wounds. And it's like, oh my God, this is Jesus here. And then he said, Tim, it was it was an amazing experience, right? And so what I love about that piece, there's right around Christmas, right before Christmas, one was installed in the center of Amsterdam. Right after Christmas, one was installed in Munich, Germany. And just next month, Lafayette is going to install at their cathedral the homeless Jesus. And to me, what that really, that was like a slap to me, that because I've had so many people that told me how much that piece means to them. And I've seen it. I've seen the impact. I've heard of the impact that it has on people. And what it realizes to me is that the eternal truths embedded within Scripture are so needed today and appreciated today. It's just the presentation, and that's, I think, then being an artist, that's what you're all about. You're all about the trying to find the best way to present Scripture, present the life of a saint, that people can see it, that it does not become invisible. And so when I see that sculpture that's being installed in so many different places around the world, it's a burden on me, because I know the eternal truths, if they're presented, will convert, and it will really impact people. And it just takes hard work, and it takes everything you have to bring that out into focus. So people today, especially people today, because we're so cynical and we're so bombarded by different things in our life, that it really has to be tough in order for it to be seen. And that's why I think that one of the reasons why I think that sculpture is great, because it takes up space. You can put it there. It's like the silent preacher that can be out there, and in a sense, it's omnipresent. But that project, like I mentioned, 10 years ago, the first one was installed. Now almost every single month, I'm installing one or two in some place in the world. And what I really realize is that I got to do the best I can in this short life to put out as many of these messages as possible, so people can come closer to God.
That's incredible, and I love how in a way it's an interactive sculpture that you could sit next to it. And I love the point you mentioned with that particular priest, that it wasn't until he sat next to it and looked at the feet. Because it's in my area as well, here in downtown Houma, especially since the hurricane 2 years ago, our homeless population has really just skyrocketed, and they're coming to, I'm at the cathedral downtown. It's such a prominent building, and people see that cathedral and they come to the office and they're asking, how can we, if we can help them. And so it is such a thing where, I see most people, like you'll see them on the street corner and you'll see people try to just avoid them, try to go the opposite way. And I love how with that piece, you make it clear that you can't even tell, and I did see a picture of it earlier, you can't even tell that it's Jesus until you get so close to see the details in the feet.
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. Wow. And then also you had presented, I guess, a miniature of that to Pope Francis.
Yeah, well, I presented the original model to Pope Francis.
Okay,
and, yeah, and it's like 10 years ago I created a piece, and it basically aligns with his papacy, which I find fascinating too, because he's so much concerned about the marginalized and the least in the world. And so I presented the model there in St. Peter's Square to the Holy Father. And I'll never forget that before he blessed it, he put his hand on the knee of the sculpture and he closed his eyes, and then he blessed the piece. And I thought, oh, this is so almost surreal at the time, right? because here's this sculpture that I created just in my my small little studio, and there it is there in St. Peter's Square being blessed by Pope Francis. And he turned around and he said, it's a beautiful, excellent representation of Jesus. And right now there's one that was installed in the Vatican, in front of the Papal Charities building in the Vatican. And there's one also in Rome, it's a different place, in the Trastevere area, which is where, I don't know if you know Rome very much, but the Trastevere area is on the side where the Vatican is, up the river. And it's where apparently the first Jews lived. They couldn't live inside Rome. They lived outside. And this is going back to the Roman Empire period of time, right? But that's where the first Christians were, in that area, because that's where the first Jews were, right? So it's really fascinating to have two of those sculptures in such meaningful places, one in Rome and one in the Vatican there. But yeah, it's interesting because I think with the marginalized, the homeless, granted 10 years ago, I don't think there was as many homeless people as there are now. It's becoming insane here in Canada as well, right? This, and I was thinking about that. I was thinking, isn't that interesting? 10 years ago, I create this piece. Now there's more homeless people than ever before, I believe, in North America. And I think that hopefully the sculpture will act as a reminder that all human life is sacred. And because it's easy to get cynical, and it's easy to get cold and inhuman, and these people become invisible. And so that hopefully will sharpen people's spiritual eyes, in a sense, to the least in our community.
Wow. Yeah. It was just a couple months ago, I was in Washington, D.C. For the annual March for Life, and we're passing downtown. I think we were on our way. We had just finished Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral in DC, and we're on our way kind of back to our next activity or to our lodging, wherever we're headed. And we passed this park in the middle of the city, and this is not far from the White House either. St. Matthew's is just about a couple blocks away from the White House. And in this park, it had become just covered with tents. It was a tent city. Mm-hmm. Of homeless people. And it's like, how can you just walk past this site to see just that a whole public park taken over, and just how can that not move somebody? It's just it's incredible to see. And that kind of site to me really, like you said, brings the point home, where it's like, in the last 10 years, just the number of homeless people has increased so greatly. Yeah. So that tells me that you're 10 years ago when you had, when you first put the sculpture out there, was a very prophetic thing. It was something that as most prophetic things do, the message comes well ahead of the time that it's needed. It's supposed to prepare us. And so that's why like I said, I consider what you do to be a wonderful ministry, because you are constantly calling people to rethink things, to conversion in such a unique way. Wow. And then did that lead to the next piece that really kind of took hold in the Vatican, and that's your Angels Unaware? Did the first piece have any kind of thing to do with you being asked to do the second one?
Oh yeah. Oh, indeed. I did the homeless Jesus, and I couldn't leave the subject matter. And so I thought, you know what? That's an amazing passage. And there's a lot of pieces to that. When I was sick, when I was in prison, when I was a stranger, and I thought the challenge is I am going to take each fragment and create a sculpture of when I was a stranger, when I was in prison, when I was naked, right? And it took me basically 5 years, and some of them were very difficult. When I was naked, which in fact, a cast of that is installed in front of St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, that sculpture, When I Was Naked. But it took me 5 years to do that, and it was an amazing exercise. It was a spiritual exercise for me, and it took me 5 years. And each one of them has a story about how I finally came to represent that image of Jesus in such a way. But after all of those pieces have been installed in various historical places in Rome, and that led to a conversation in Rome with Cardinal Czerny when Pope Francis appointed him the undersecretary to his new Department of Migrants and Refugees. He asked me, can I please come up, spend some time thinking of the idea of migration and doing a sculpture. And I remember I said to Cardinal Czerny, I got a lot of sculptures right now that would probably fit that. And he said, no, please think about a new one, okay? So I go back to my studio here in Canada, and it's just like, boom, the idea hit me. All the time when I'm here in my studio, I'm listening to the Bible, right? And it's part of my practice. And so I remember a year before I met Cardinal Czerny in Rome, I heard Angels Unawares, Hebrews 13:2, be welcoming to strangers. Many have entertained angels unawares. And like I've heard that a lot of different times, but I just really, really kind of felt it this one time. And I thought, oh my God, I have to do a sculpture of this. And I was thinking, there must be 100 beautiful sculptures of this Angels Unawares, and I couldn't find anything. I just found coffee cups and plaques on the internet. And so I thought, okay, this is a big opening here. This is a big blind spot in the history of Christian artwork that this hasn't been represented. So I'm trying to figure out how to represent Hebrews 13:2, be welcoming to strangers, many have entertained angels unawares. And it's really taken me more than a year to figure this out. Nothing I came up with satisfied me. And so I kind of put it in the library of sculptures I have to do. And I came back from Rome after this request, and the idea of having a crowded raft or a boat with migrants, refugees, immigrants from all historical periods, from all different areas of the whole world, represented together on this raft, shoulder to shoulder. And in the center of this raft is an angel. But because of this crowd, you can only see the wings. And then the wings, in a sense, become everyone's wings. And so I just dropped everything I was doing. I started to do a model of it. And I was just getting so excited about it because it's really a tapestry of humanity, because everyone has been an immigrant. Every group of people have been an immigrant at some historical period of time. So I start creating this model. I'm frustrated because I know the piece should be life-size. the heads on the model were so small to get the details were very difficult. And so I not quite finished the model, and I sent a photograph of it to the Vatican. And then I got an email back saying, Pope Francis would like you to bring the model to St. Peter's Square so he can bless it. And I'm like, I'm not even done the model yet. So now my hands are shaking. I'm like, oh my God. I get done the model. We bring it over to St. Peter's Square at the general audience, the Wednesday where there's crowds of people there. Pope Francis, first time he actually obviously sees the 3D model, and he blesses it. And shortly after that, it was probably one of the greatest emails possible that the sculpture, life size, will be installed in St. Peter's Square. And this is when we want to do it. I'm like, okay, this is an important deadline here, right? And so I just, again, I drop everything that I'm doing and I start working on this sculpture, and it was amazing. I was living with these people, their faces, their stories were all embedded within that clay that I was working on. It took me nonstop, 15 hours a day, like 7 months to get the clay to the point where I was really happy. And it was bizarre because here I am putting people in that you usually don't see in church artwork, like an Hasidic Jew, like Muslims. And I'm putting not one, I'm putting a lot in. And at one time I thought, this might be a little bit too much here. And I thought, well, what would Pope Francis say? Specifically, what I'm talking about is I have a Muslim with the face garb, full cloth, but for the eyes. And here in Canada, there was a big debate going on at the time. This is like 2018, of whether they should be legally allowed to wear their religious garb in public government jobs, right? And so it's a heated debate here. And here I am putting a Muslim and a Jew right at the front of the boat together, right? And I thought, well, what would Pope Francis want? He'd say, yeah, he'd want that, right? And so it was always like I was feeling like I was, in a sense, his hands for this creative project, because I was really feeling throughout the whole thing what I know this message means a lot to him, the idea of welcoming all people. And so I better do the best job I possibly can, because in a sense, that sculpture will become a visual ambassador for his message, right? But what I love about it too, just like the homeless Jesus, it's Matthew 25, 3D. And this is really angels unawares, be welcoming to strangers, many have entertained angels unawares. And it's so discreet though, because you walk by the St. Peter's Square and you see all these people from all different historical periods from everywhere in the world. And then you see the angel's wings, and you might see the top of the head of the angel, but that's it. But then it kind of reveals itself, the message. It's not trying to be in your face at all. It's very discreet. And it was only possible to make it discreet by having 140 different people in it. If it was just like 3 with an angel, you couldn't hide that angel, right? It would be, European, Asian, African, angel. No, that wouldn't work, right? So I actually stopped at 140 figures in it, because I thought, it's going to St. Peter's Square, and there the colonnade has the Bernini sculptures, and there's 140 different saints on that colonnade surrounding St. Peter's Square. So I thought I could bring that in as kind of a symbol too, right? So yeah, that project was amazing. The one that was in your town is the second cast of it that is now in Washington, D.C., Catholic University, right beside the National Shrine there. And there's another cast of it in Canada, and I'm in the process of making a 4th cast of it.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's the fact that you're able to put that many figures in that sculpture is just mind-blowing. Just the attention to detail, and then, like you said, to find the angel kind of embedded amongst all those figures. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, definitely. And we will, what I'll do is whenever we publish this episode is on my social media pages for the podcast, we'll go ahead and post pictures of these two sculptures for sure. So
Excellent.
people can see what we're talking about. And but certainly, wow, it's just incredible stuff. With that, can you tell us, and especially for our listeners as well, how can we find your works? Where do you have different casts of your sculptures at? Where can we find that? Any websites you have? How can we find your work around the world?
You can find it easily if you know how to spell my last name correctly, Schmalz. Yeah, as long as you don't put a T in, the Schmaltzes with the T, they're the enemies. But if you just type in my name, Timothy Schmalz, Schmalz, and type in news, that would probably bring you to the most current stuff. On Google, you have buttons like images would be good. News, it'll lead you to probably some of my latest stuff going on. And so that would be I got a lot of different projects happening right now that are very exciting. So yeah, just follow my news stuff, and you can see what I'm working on. This is what I'm working on right now. Can I show you this?
Oh yeah, the listeners won't be able to see it, but I'm certainly gonna
yeah, that's true.
tell them. Holy cannoli, geez.
Yeah, let me show you this. These are my latest project is Stations of the Cross for Orlando, the Basilica Mary Queen of the Universe Basilica. And dude, this is life size here, right? And there are, let me just show you here. This is my dream of a project, because these Stations of the Cross are going to have in the background all of the parables of the Bible put in, right? And so I just working on the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan, the scenes in the background. This is what I'm doing. I'm actually creating what Jesus taught in the distance, right? But this one here, Jesus, the one I'm showing you right now is Jesus being nailed to the cross.
Yeah.
This one is the number 11, station number 11. Number 12 is going to be 30 feet long. And
this is going to be in Orlando, you said?
Yeah, the Mary Queen of the Universe Basilica in Orlando. They are going to have what we're going to be calling this the Gospel Gardens. One of the reasons why we're just not calling it the Stations of the Cross is because people think that Stations of the Cross are kind of boring. It's something that when you're bored in church, you look at. No. This is going to be one of the most amazing Catholic artistic experiences out there, right? Okay, let me just give you a little sneak clue on. Okay, so you'll have station 12, which is the crucifixion. That's going to be 30 feet long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Station 13. Okay, don't forget it's the basilica is called Mary Queen of the Universe, right?
Right.
Station 13 is when Jesus comes down from the cross.
Right.
She's going to be in the arms of Mary, one of the arms of Mary. Mary's going to be holding the body as it has just come down off of the cross. She's going to be very almost like a Pieta, the Pieta, the Michelangelo's Pieta.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But her one hand is going to be raised, her other hand is going to be embracing Jesus. And that hand is going to be silhouetted by the cross. What's going to be silhouetting the cross is the Universal Church, represented with hundreds of saints from all over the world. It's just going to, right? It's Mary, Queen of the Universe, have the Universal Church represented by all the saints. So I am going to be working on one of my most difficult projects ever. And that is, I am going to be doing a 30-foot long sculpture that will include saints from all over the world. And I'm going to be blasting in probably around 300 of them, right? You can't put all the saints in because there's so, that would be a county in Ireland, right? So I gotta just take I got to just take some from each region in the world. And it's just going to be awesome. I've been working on this project for the last year, and it is one of the most challenging because I think that that this is the passion, the crucifixion. This is the eye of the storm. This is in the center of it all. And yeah, after I did a couple of very large pieces, I thought I'm ready for this challenge, and it is a challenge. It's an amazing exercise for my artwork, right? But yeah, it's exciting. I've been working on it. I'll probably be done the whole project probably by the end of the summer, because I'm basically living here in my studio. I'm not doing anything else again, and but it is so rewarding to do this, and I'm getting seriously into it, right?
That's incredible. I will definitely be making a trip to Orlando whenever they're installed, because one, I have a friend who lives in Orlando, and then also I'll probably need to defrost because I'll be living in Alaska for the next 2 to 3 years with the Air Force. So yeah, I'll have to fill you in on that another time. But yeah, so that's incredible. And you know, again, like, our listeners won't be able to see this, but guys, I'm telling you right now, the pictures I'm seeing just from inside his studio, this is incredible. This is gonna be if you find your way going through Orlando, if you're going to Disney World in Orlando, go stop by the Basilica, because these things are going to just be absolutely awe-inspiring. So with that, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such an incredible, such a powerful witness that you've given us today. Please be assured of our prayers for you in your, again, I consider this a ministry that you're doing for the church. You are helping to bring people to whole new levels of prayer through your work. What you do is absolutely incredible. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. With that, that will conclude our time today. For our listeners, just so you're aware, my book, Jesus in the Dojo, went on sale on Easter Sunday. You can now find Jesus in the Dojo on Barnes & Noble's and Amazon's websites. And with that, that will conclude our time. So we will see you all next time. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Karate Priest. If you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and like The Karate Priest on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're ever in South Louisiana, come visit me at the Cathedral of St. Francis de Sales in Houma. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can also email me at thekaratepriest@gmail.com. Your questions are welcomed and may be used in future episodes. May the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down on you and remain with you forever. Amen.
Hi everyone, I'm Todd Fisher, the host of the Cult Following podcast. Cult Following is a podcast that studies the personalities and common traits of cult leaders and their followers. Get the real story behind these infamous and oftentimes tragic cults from a new perspective through exhaustive research and from interviews with people that were there. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fisher and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure and visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com or find us on social media for other unique content.